Welcome to Scriptural Snapshots, brought to you by Living Faith Ministries in Kaiser, West Virginia, where we bring the living Word of God into your life. I'm Pastor Gordon Brubaker. We're talking about out of captivity, and last week we started looking at Israel, how they got into captivity, and we finished up Friday talking about Moses, that Moses was called to be the deliverer. He was the voice of God to Pharaoh that had enslaved the people of God. And without Moses accepting the call by faith and accepting what God had put on his heart, nothing would have happened. I mean, I'm sure personally, I'm sure God would have raised somebody else up, but Moses was the man, and Moses was the one who responded, and Moses was the one that God gifted. And we know what began to happen. We're not going to go through the plagues. We're not going to go through all these things and all the symbolism that's in that of where the God Yahweh defeated every single god that the Egyptians had, and every plague was showing that God is greater than the God of the Egyptians. But he did all that. And Moses brought Israel out of captivity. And we think, wow, yes, this is great, this is fantastic, but this is not the end of the story. As Paul Harvey used to say, and here's the rest of the story. You know, sometimes we think that just once we get out of slavery, if we get out of our current situation, we can relax, we don't have to worry anymore, everything's going to be great, everything's going to be wonderful, and then you find another problem, and then we start, well, did God really do anything at all? Did God really help me at all in this, or did he jump out of the frying pan into the fire? You know, we just get confused at that point. Excuse me. And what the problem is, once we're free, we think that everything from there is easy, and it's not easy. A life of faith is difficult. That's why the Bible tells us, that the just shall live by faith, because faith is something you've got a purpose in your heart to live by. Faith is not an accident. Faith is a response to what God initiates. And Moses had that faith to believe God when God called him. And Moses finally just yielded himself and said, "Here I am, Lord." And him and God said, "I'll help you. I'll do all this stuff." But Israel now is out of Egypt. They've come out, and guess where they went? They went to the wilderness. And they spent 40 years in the wilderness that should have been like a 10-day trial or travel at the most. I mean, 40 years. They're stuck in the wilderness for 40 years because it was unbelief. Now, see, just because you get out of slavery does not mean that your mentality has changed. It doesn't mean that you think any differently than what you did beforehand. Battered women, for instance, when they finally get away from their husband that batters them, they think they're free, but they still think as a battered wife. They still think of someone who is beaten and abused. Now, go back to Joseph. When Joseph was sold by his brothers, that could have defined his life. Everything after that could have been, my family hates me, nobody wants me, I'm unloved, I'm a slave, and he could have just given up on life. But when he comes out in Potiphar's house and he's on top of the world, he could have still had that mentality. Well, if he had that, he probably would have never rose to where he was. But what I'm trying to say is, Israel came out of slavery, but yet they still acted and thought as slaves. They didn't realize what freedom was. Miles Monroe says freedom comes with a cost, and the price of freedom is greater than that of being a slave. And you see that in the wilderness, that Moses had people come and say, it was better for us in Egypt, in slavery and bondage. It was better that we eat the onions in Egypt than the manna that God is giving to us. And a lot of people think this way. Dennis Prager says, freedom is a virtue. It's something you have to learn to accept. It's a value that you have to cultivate in your life, because the natural thing of men, the natural desire of people is to be taken care of. And even in slavery, you may hate it, but someone's taking care of you. And someone's looking out. There's decisions you don't have to make. But when you're free, every decision now is up to you. You have got to choose your direction of life. You have got to make decisions. You have choices out there, and sometimes the choices can overwhelm us because we don't know what to choose. But you've got to have the issue of freedom in your life, the virtue of freedom. You've got to lift this up and decide, I'm a free person and I'm going to stay free, and no one is going to dominate me because I serve the God of liberty who has a spirit of truth in him. I'm Pastor Gordon Brubaker. I want you to serve God and serve the freedom that God has given to us as believers. God bless you.